Hey, Cubs, and we are happy Monday. We're going to continue our shared reading of Norton Juster's The Phantom Tollbooth. I want us to take a moment to remember where we left off on Friday. So on Friday, Milo and Talk, the watchdog, were heading into Dictionopolis. They started there, and Talk said something that was very wise. Remember, he said, and so let's go back and I'll read it exactly so that we can talk about what you believed it meant. He said, let's see. Oh, he said, Milo says, I never knew words could be so confusing. And then Talk says, only when you use a lot to say a little. So that's what I asked you guys to comment about on our class story. That's what I asked you to tell me. What do you think that means? And I think that pretty much everybody had the same answers. So we came with an agreement. They might not have been the exact same, but they were the same. They meant the same thing. So, for example, let's see. So Srivatsa said, I think it means if you use a lot of words to say something, it would be say something that's little, you get confused. And Mason kind of agreed with him. Nishvita says, you can just maybe say one word to just explain something instead of a lot. And the same thing, and Sarvanch felt like if you say less, the easier it'll be for you to understand. And the same thing, and Diley also thought the same thing. Houston says it means don't say that many words. Well, I don't know if it means don't say that many words. I think that Shreya is right when she says when you mean to say a little, when you say a little, sometimes you say a lot. It means you don't need to say a whole bunch of words just to say a whole bunch of words, right? Because Caden and Shannon thought that Caden and Louisa thought that too. And so did Sarvanch. So basically, it's saying if you can say something with a few words, say it with a few words. Don't keep adding more words to it because then it could be confusing. Like the ministers of the cabinet, they're very confusing. The Duke of Definition. All right, so we're going to start today on Chapter 4. We're still in Dictionopolis. Confusion in the marketplace. So let's get going. Indeed, it was. So it says, indeed, what was? So let's go back and read. Milo thought this was quite the wisest thing he'd heard all day. Come, he shouted, let's see the market. It looks very exciting. So the market must be exciting, right? Indeed, it was, for as they approached, Milo could see crowds of people pushing and shouting their way among the stalls, buying and selling, trading and bargaining. Huge wooden wheeled carts streamed into the market square from the orchard, and long caravans bound for the four corners of the kingdom made ready to leave. Sacks and boxes were piled high, waiting to be delivered to ships that sailed the Sea of Knowledge. Ooh, let's go look at some of that stuff. Oh, well, here's the Sea of Knowledge, right? It's really big. So there's ships that sail on that. That's interesting to know. And off to one side, a group of minstrels sang songs to delight those either too young or too old to engage in trade. So let's think about what a minstrel is. So it's a group, so it's got to be people, right? A group of minstrels sang songs to the delight of those too young or too old to be engaged in trade. So I guess it's like a group of people who sing and entertain people, right? Does it make sense? But above all the noise and tumult of the crowd could be heard the merchant's voice loudly advertising their product. Get your hand-picked ifs, ands, and buts. Hey-ya, hey-ya, hey-ya. Nice ripe wares and wins. Juicy, tempting, words for sale. I want us to pause. And now we know, what are they actually selling? Were they actually selling words, which is interesting. But I guess so. Oh, here's a picture kind of what it looks like a little bit. And there's Milo and Talk in the middle and all the stalls of people and carts kind of around it. You can notice that Jules Pfeiffer, the illustrator of this book, he used pen. So all of his pictures are very line-esque. They're not really like super detailed because he wants you to know who is the most important person in this picture. Well, it's got to be these people in the center who have the most detail. Everybody else is kind of faceless because they're not as important as those two characters in the center. Because you can't see, but Milo has a face and so does Talk, and none of these other people do for that reason. Anyway, let's keep going. So many words and so many people. They were from every place imaginable, and some places even beyond that. And they were all busy sorting, choosing, and stuffing things into cases. As soon as one was filled, another was begun. There seemed to be no end to the bustle and activity. Milo and Talk wandered up and down the aisles, looking at the wonderful assortment of words for sale. There were short ones and easy ones for everyday use, and long and very important ones for special occasions, and even some marvelously fancy ones packed in individual gift boxes for use in royal decrees and pronouncements. Step right up, fancy, best quality words here, announced one man in a booming voice. Oh, booming. Step right up, fancy, best quality words here, announced one man in a booming voice. Step right up. Ah, what can I do for you, little boy? How about a nice bag full of pronouns? Or maybe you'd like a special assortment of names. Milo had never thought much about words before, but these looked so good that he longed to have some. Look, Talk, he cried. Aren't they wonderful? They're fine if you have something to say, replied Talk in a tired voice, for he was much more interested in finding a bone than in shopping for new words. Well, I guess he is a dog, right? Maybe if I buy some, I can learn how to use them, said Milo eagerly as he began to pick through the words in the stall. Finally, he chose 3 which looked particularly good to him: quagmire, flabbergast, and upholstery. He had no idea what they meant, but they looked very grand and elegant. I want us to pause there. I'm sure that you yourself have found words that you don't know what they meant. In fact, those words maybe you don't know what quagmire, flabbergast, and upholstery mean. Have you ever heard somebody use a word and then they don't even know what the word means? I have. Sometimes that happens where we use words and we might not even fully understand what they mean. But it's important for us to take a moment to figure it out, right? How much are these? He inquired. When the man whispered the answer, he quickly put them back on the shelf and started to walk on. Why not take a few pounds of happies, advised the salesman. They're much more practical and very useful for happy birthday, happy new year, happy days, and happy-go-lucky. Well, I like that very much, began Milo, or perhaps you'd be interested in a package of goods. Always handy for good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and goodbye, he suggested. Milo did want to buy something, but the only money he had was the coin he needed to get back through the toll booth, and Talk, of course, had nothing but the time. No, thank you, replied Milo. We're just looking. And they continued on through the market. As they turned down the last aisle of stalls, Milo noticed a wagon that seemed different from the rest. On its side was a neatly lettered sign that said, "Do it yourself," and inside were 26 bins filled with all the letters of the alphabet from A to Z. These are for people who like to make their own words, the man in charge informed him. You can pick any assortment you like, or buy a special box complete with all the letters, punctuation marks, and a book of instructions. Here, taste an A. They're very good. Milo nibbled carefully at the letter and discovered that it was quite sweet and delicious, just the way you would expect an A to taste. I knew you'd like it, laughed the letter man, popping 2 G's and an R into his mouth and letting the juice drip down his chin. So they're actually eating the letters. Interesting. A's are one of my most popular letters. All of them aren't as good, he confided in a low voice. Take the Z, for instance. Very dry and sawdusty. And the X, why, it tastes like a trunk full of stale air. That's why people hardly ever use them. But most of the others are quite tasty. Try some more. He gave Milo an I, which was icy and refreshing, and Talk took a crisp, crunchy C. Most people are just too lazy to make their own words, he continued, but it's much more fun. Is it difficult? I'm not much good at making words, admitted Milo, spitting the pits from a P. Perhaps I can be of some assistance. ASSISTANCE, buzzed an unfamiliar voice, and when Milo looked up, he saw an enormous bee at least twice his size on top of the wagon. I am the spelling bee, announced the spelling bee. Don't be alarmed. ALARMED. So I want us to pause here. When we think of spelling bees, we don't actually think of a bee that spells. A spelling bee is another word for it's like a contest of spelling, right? But in this way, Norton Juster has used it to give it, just like with our watchdog, he's told us something that is exactly what it means, right? For example, with Talk, he made a dog that was exactly a dog that was made of a watch, right? Instead of a dog that's on the lookout, although Talk is kind of both. And this spelling bee isn't not a contest for spelling. This spelling bee is a literal bee that spells. So that's some of the wordplay that Norton Juster does. So we want to keep our eyes out and our ears out, I guess, because you're also listening, to see when we find those things in our book that mean 2 different things, right? So let's come back under the spelling bee. Talk ducked under the wagon, and Milo, who was not overly fond of normal-sized bees, began to back away slowly. I can spell anything. Anything. Anything, he boasted, testing his wings. Try me. Can you spell goodbye? Suggested Milo as he continued to back away. The bee gently lifted himself into the air and circled lazily over Miles' head. Perhaps, PERHAPS, you are under the misapprehension, MISAPPREHENSION, that I am dangerous, he said, turning a small loop to the left. Let me assure you, ASSURE, that my intentions are peaceful, PEACEFUL. And with that, he set back on top of the wagon and fanned himself with one wing. Now, he panted, think of the most difficult word you can, and I'll spell it. Hurry up. He jumped up and down patiently. So almost this spelling bee wants to have a spelling bee, right? He looks friendly enough, thought Milo, not sure how friendly a friendly bumblebee should be, and tried to think of a very difficult word. Spell vegetable, he suggested, for it was one that always troubled him in school. That is a difficult one, said the bee, winking at the letterman. Let me see now. He frowned and wiped his brow and paced slowly back and forth on top of the wagon. How much time do I have? Just 10 seconds, cried Milo excitedly. Count them off, Talk. Oh dear, the bee repeated, continuing to pace nervously. Just then, as time ran out, he spelled as fast as he could, VEGETABLE. Correct, shouted the letterman, and everyone cheered. Can you spell everything? Asked Milo admiringly. Just about, replied the bee with a hint of pride in his voice. You see, years ago I was just an ordinary bee, minding my own business, smelling flowers all day, and I occasionally picking up part-time work in people's bonnets. Then, one day, I realized I'd never amount to anything without an education, and being naturally adept at spelling, I decided that balderdash, shouted a booming voice, and from around the wagon stepped a large beetle-like insect dressed in a lavish coat, striped pants, a checked vest, spats, and a derby hat. So he kind of looked like this, right? He was a very fancy dressed bug. Let me repeat, balderdash, he shouted again, swinging his cane and clicking his heels in midair. Come now, don't be an ill-mannered. Isn't someone going to introduce me to this little boy? And that's where we're going to stop. Well, we've got a few more pages. Yeah, we'll just continue. We only have like 2 more pages. This, said the bee with complete disdain. I wonder what disdain means. We'll figure it out. Let's read the rest of the sentence and see if we can figure out what disdain means. This, said the bee with complete disdain, is the humbug, a very dislikable fellow. So pause. If he's very dislikable, we know that dis means not. So he's not able to be, and able means can be. So he cannot be liked. So that's what the spelling bee is saying about the humbug. So if he's saying it with disdain, he must be saying it with like a yuck. Like, I don't like you, right? So disdain must be like complete dislike. Maybe that kind of means dislike. This, said the bee with complete disdain, is the humbug, a very dislikable fellow. A humbug. Now, I want us to think about I have a plan for you about the word humbug. So don't forget. Nonsense! Everybody loves a humbug, shouted the humbug, as I was saying to the king just the other day. You've never met the king, accused the bee angrily, and then turning to Milo, he said, Don't believe a thing this old fraud says. So fraud, don't believe a thing this old fraud says. So he's basically saying that humbug must like to do what? Yeah, lie. Bosh, replied the humbug. We're an old noble family, honorable to the core. Insectus humbugium, if I may use the Latin. Why, we fought in the Crusades with Richard the Lionheart, crossed the Atlantic with Columbus, blazed trails with the pioneers, and today many members of the family hold prominent government positions throughout the world. History is full of humbugs. Now, humbug does have another meaning. And for you, what I'd like for you to do today is I would like for you to use a dictionary and look up what humbug means and see if the word humbug fits the humbug description of the actual humbug. Okay? We're going to finish the chapter first, though. A very pretty speech, S-P-E-E-C-H, was sneered the bee. Now why don't you go away? I was just advising the lad of the importance of proper spelling. Bah, said the bug, putting an arm around Milo. As soon as you learn to spell one word, they'll ask you to spell another. You can never catch up, so why bother? Take my advice, my boy, and forget about it. As my great-great-grandfather, George Washington Humbug, used to say, You, sir, shouted the bee very excitedly, are an impostor, I-M-P-O-S-T-O-R, who can't even spell his own name. A lavish concern for the composition of words is a sign of a bankrupt intellect, roared the humbug, waving his cane furiously. I want us to pause and think about what he said. A slavish concern, so concern for the composition of words. So he's saying, like, Worrying about spelling is a sign of a bankrupt intellect. So bankrupt means you don't have any. So you don't have any intellect, and intellect is smarts. So basically he's saying if you worry about spelling all the time, then you're not very smart. Yeah, so is that a nice thing to say? No. Milo didn't have any idea what this meant, but we do because we just explained it, right? He's insulting the spelling bee by saying if you care about spelling, you're dumb. That's what he's saying, right? Milo didn't have any idea what this meant, but it seemed to infuriate the spelling bee, who flew down and knocked the humbug's hat off the humbug's hat with his wing. "Be careful!" shouted Milo as the bug swung his cane again. There he is, catching the bee on the foot and knocking over a box of W's. "My foot!" shouted the bee. "My hat!" shouted the bug, and the fight was on. The spelling bee buzzed dangerously in and out of range of the humbug's wildly swinging cane as they menaced and threatened each other, and the crowd stepped back out of danger. "There must be some way to," began Milo, and then he yelled, "Watch out!" But it was too late. There was a tremendous crash as the humbug, in his great fury, tripped into one of the stalls, knocking it into another, then another, then another, then another, until every stall in the marketplace had been upset, and the words lay scrambled in great confusion all over the square. So basically, it was like a chain reaction, kind of like a Rube Goldberg device, right? One hit another stall, which hit another stall, which hit another stall, which hit another stall, until there was a huge mess. The bee, who had tangled himself on some bunting, toppled to the ground, knocking Milo over on top of him, and lay there shouting, "Help! Help! There's a little boy on me!" The bug, sprawled untidily on a mound of squashed letters and talk, his alarm ringing persistently, was buried under a pile of words. So we're going to stop and find out what short shrift means. Short shrift. So there's two things I would like for you to look up. One is, what's a humbug? Is it a good name for this character right here, based on what the bee might have said about him? And the other thing is, I want you to look up what a short shrift is. Somebody says, I got the short shrift. What does that mean? It's important for our next chapter, okay? So let us know the definitions in the comments below. And if you agree with somebody else's definition, you can also say that. But you should totally look it up. So again, what's a humbug? Does it fit the humbug? Yes or no? Your thoughts? And what's a short shrift? All right, guys. We'll continue our reading tomorrow.